Shalom, 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 shalom. Bunyam Yasha'Allah, Bunyam Tazadak, Bunyam Malak. Barakathum Bahashim Yahweh Bahashim Hamashiach Yahawashi. Call Haloyam La Yahweh Thum Yad. It's your brother Ak Lamak, representing Mount Zion Reborn, the truth tellers, Amath Payath. And in this video, I'm going to do a breakdown, an irrefutable breakdown on Romans 11. You have many people bringing altered versions and breakdowns pertaining to this chapter, but it's all to be seen of men or to be highly regarded as scholarly and not breaking down the chapters in the books of the scriptures for the glory of Yahweh Yahawashi. And as a result, they're being exposed as false teachers. But brothers and sisters, hear this. I consider myself the less than the least of all the great elders who have come before me and all the great teachers that have come before me. Let everything that I do as it pertains to breaking down scriptures be for the glory of Yahweh Yahawashi. And Romans 11 is not a chapter for casual reading. It is the key that unlocks the mystery of the Israelites' restoration and the covenant promises that cannot fail. This lesson will be delivered with absolute fear of Yahweh, the fear that guards against adding to his word or diminishing the exclusivity of his covenants, the intimacy of his steadfast and enduring relationship with his bride, and the promises sworn to the forefathers. This breakdown is rooted firmly in the law, the prophets, and the Psalms, and anchored by the divine word of Yahweh. It will not be shaped by church traditions, replacement theology, or human guesswork. And if you follow the context, there will be no room to add in what you think or feel, Paul is saying. The backstory follows the recorded history of the Israelites, written and cataloged in this very book, the Holy Scriptures. Every word here is anchored in covenant truth, for no one can alter or amend what Yahweh has declared. And to the scattered, to those wandering among the nations, stripped of heritage and identity, hear this. You are not forgotten, nor lost beyond repair. Yahweh, our power, sees your affliction. He knows the tears that fall in silence, the prayers whispered in exile, the longing for what was promised to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. You have been called Gentiles, heathens, not a people. But these are lies imposed by those who would hide Yahweh's covenant and his plan for you. Understand this. Dispersion was never abandonment. From Assyria to Babylon, the prophets spoke of scattering, blindness, and slumber, but they also promised a restoration, a gathering, and life from the dead. Yahawashi, the deliverer, was sent not only to the elect in Judea, but to those buried among the nations, so that his work might awaken the lost and provoke the stubborn to repentance. You have inherited a lineage, a covenant, and promises. Though your garments are torn and your customs mingled with the nations, the root remains holy and unbroken. The olive tree, that is Israel, still holds you. The law, the prophets, and the Psalms speak of you. Yahweh has never cast you off, and the blessings promised to the fathers still await you. One of the most difficult chapters to break down is Romans 11, because etymology alone will not suffice. Paul's usage of terms like Gentile and world shifts according to context, which is consistent with Scripture itself. And the only way to understand it is to read through a covenantal lens, following the epistle faithfully, seeing the Israelites, not the nations, as the subject of Yahweh's plan. Today is the lesson for the awakening, for those stirring from the sleep imposed by unbelief, for those remembering who they are. Prepare your hearts, open your eyes, lift your minds from the vanities of the nations. The story of the Israelites is not finished, and your part in it is being restored. The deliverer will come, the covenant will stand, and all the Israelites shall be saved. The scattered are called back, the hidden are now seen, and the blind shall be given sight. Today we stepped into understanding, for the Most High has not forgotten his own. I pray you understand that. Before entering Romans 11, you have to remember one key thing. At the very beginning of Paul's epistles to the Romans, he told you that the gospel of God was already promised beforehand by his prophets in the Holy Scriptures. That means nothing. Paul teaches in Romans 11 can break, alter, or expand beyond what the law and prophets already declared about the Israelites' covenant, the Israelites' fall, and the Israelites' restoration. If the prophets don't promise salvation to all nations, then Romans 11 cannot suddenly create it. With that foundation set, we can now step into the chapter. This is the book of Romans, chapter 11, verse 1, and it reads, I say then, hath God cast away his people? God forbid. For I am also an Israelite of the seed of Abraham, of the tribe of Benjamin. Paul begins with the question that shakes every foundation and every false doctrine. Has Yahweh abandoned Israel? His answer thunders, God forbid. In the Greek, it means may it never be. Impossible under God's covenant. Then Paul gives proof. Himself, a living Israelite saved by grace, standing as evidence that Yahweh has not rejected his people. Paul does not appeal to spiritual Israel or a man-made church system. His appeal is to bloodline, seed of Abraham, tribe of Benjamin. Why? Because the question is national and genealogical, not metaphorical. If Yahweh saved even one man from Abraham's literal seed, then the Israelites as a nation is not cast away. The covenant still holds. The promises still stand. Yahweh does not abandon the lineage he swore to bless. This single verse shatters every counterfeit doctrine or replacement theology, spiritual Israel, and the myth that faith erases ancestry. Paul roots his argument in the covenant, lineage, and identity. This is the book of Psalms, chapter 94, verse 14, and it reads, For Yahweh will not cast off his people, neither will he forsake his inheritance. This is not poetry. This is rooted in the covenant. Yahweh swore that his people will never be abandoned, and his inheritance never forsaken, even in judgment, scattering, or exile. His commitment remains unbroken. Paul's question in Romans 11:1, has God cast away his people, is answered here long before Paul ever wrote one epistle. No, never, impossible. This is the book of Jeremiah, chapter 31, verse 37, and it reads, "For thus saith Yahweh, if the heaven above can be measured, and the foundations of the earth searched out beneath, I will also cast off all the seed of Israel for all they have done. Thus saith Yahweh." Yahweh ties the Israelites' covenant to the created order. Measure the heavens, search the earth's foundation. Only then could the Israelites be erased, and that will never happen. Their identity, their election, their covenant is as fixed as the universe itself. When Paul says God forbid, he is echoing this prophetic certainty. Romans 11 stands on the immovable promises of Yahweh. The Israelites cannot be dismissed, replaced, or erased. Every doctrine claiming otherwise collapses under the weight of these verses. The covenant is eternal, and the inheritance is secure. The story of the Israelites are not finished, and it never will be. This is the book of Romans, chapter 11, verses 2 through 4, and it reads, "God has not cast away his people which he foreknew." That means the people God foreknew is his people. "What ye not what the scripture saith of Elias, how he made intercession to God against Israel, saying, Yahweh, they have killed thy prophets and digged down thine altars, and I am left alone, and they seek my life. What saith the answer of God unto him? I have reserved to myself 7,000 men who have not bowed to the knee to the image of Baal." Paul strengthens his opening declaration with an appeal to one of the most dramatic moments in the Israelites' history, the days of prophet Elijah. God had not cast away his people which he foreknew, but he didn't just foreknow them. This is the book of Amos, chapter 3, verse 2, and it reads, "You only have I known of all the families of the earth. Therefore I will punish you for all your iniquities." This is the literal reason why even writing to them in their broken condition comes to the forefront. Again, Paul reaffirms Israelites' condition is not proof of rejection. The word foreknew means to know beforehand through covenant relationship. Yahweh knew the Israelites as his people long before they sinned, fell, or rebelled. And that covenant knowledge cannot be undone by their failures. The same Israelites he foreknew from Abraham's day is the same Israelites he deals with in Paul's day. No switch, no replacement, no spiritual redefinition. He brings up Elijah. Elijah lived during a time where the Israelites had plunged into idolatry, assassinated the prophets, and abandoned the covenant. From the prophet's human viewpoint, it looked like the nation was finished. Paul uses Elijah to prove that even in the Israelites' darkest apostasy, Yahweh has never cast them off nor erased their identity. This is the book of 1 Kings, chapter 19, verse 14 and 18. And it reads, "And he said, I have been very jealous for Yahweh Tazabawath, the Lord God of hosts, because the children of Israel have forsaken thy covenant, thrown down thine altars, and slain thy prophets with the sword. And I, even I only, am left, and they seek my life to take it away." That's Prophet Elijah. Verse 18, "Yet I have left me 7,000 in Israel, all the knees which have not bowed unto Baal, and every mouth which had not kissed him." Elijah complains to Yahweh that he has been left alone, and that he is the only one left who is faithful, and that the people have forsaken the covenant. This is the voice of apparent despair, echoing the fear that the righteous remnant has been swallowed by widespread rebellion. But in the 18th verse, Yahweh responds, He has preserved 7,000 in Israel who have not bowed to Baal or kissed him, a faithful remnant untouched by idolatry. This shows that even when it seems like the nation has entirely turned away, the Most High, Barakatah Yahweh, always preserves a remnant according to his covenant purposes. Judgment does not erase his people or nullify his promises. Elijah wasn't wrong about Israel's sins. He was wrong about Yahweh's covenant faithfulness. And this is exactly the mistake that modern Christianity repeats today. And it's trickled into the truth. This is the book of Isaiah, chapter 1, verse 8 and 9, and it reads, And the daughter of Zion is left as a cottage in a vineyard, as a lodge in a garden of cucumbers, as a besieged city, except Yahweh Tazabawath, the Lord of hosts, had left unto us a very small remnant, we should have been as Sodom, and we should have been like unto Gomorrah. Isaiah chapter 1 and 9 is foundational for understanding God's preservation of a faithful remnant. The imagery is stark. The Israelites have sinned and are under judgment, yet Yahweh's mercy ensures that he never completely destroys his people. A small preserved remnant remains, sustaining the covenant and the future hope of restoration. This idea of a remnant is the backbone for Paul's argument in Romans 11. Just as Isaiah emphasizes that even in the nation's sinfulness, a remnant is preserved, Paul points out that Yahweh has not rejected his people because he has always maintained a faithful remnant, those foreknown and chosen by him. The remnant is proof of the Most High's faithfulness, and Israelites' covenant identity continues, even when the majority are blind, rebellious, or in exile. This is the book of Romans, chapter 11, verse 5, and it reads, Even so then at this present time also there is a remnant according to the election of grace. This means the pattern Yahweh established in Isaiah's day has not changed. Just as Isaiah 1 and 9 shows that the Israelites were spared from total destruction, it's only because Yahweh himself has preserved a remnant. Paul is showing the same preservation continues in his time. The Israelites' unfaithfulness never cancels the Most High's covenant because Yahweh always keeps a portion of his people faithful to sustain the promise. So, Romans chapter 11 verse 5 is simply the New Testament expression of the same ancient truth. Despite the nation's condition, whether idolatry in Isaiah's day, apostasy in Elijah's day, or spiritual blindness in Paul's day, Yahweh himself maintains a remnant. That remnant is the evidence that he has not cast away his people, the proof that the covenant stands, and the assurance that the Israelite story is not over. This is the book of Romans chapter 11 verse 6, and it reads, And if by grace, then it is no more of works. Otherwise grace is no more grace. But if it be of works, then it is no more grace. Otherwise work is no more work. And this verse has absolutely nothing to do with Christianity's lawless grace doctrine. Paul is not preaching Western ideas of no commandments and just belief. He is declaring that Yahweh preserves a remnant because he decreed it, not because the Israelites deserved it. Grace here means covenant mercy, Yahweh's sovereign choice to keep his promises despite their failures. If survival depended on works alone, the Israelites would be finished. But Yahweh's plan stands because his word cannot fail. You see, he made an everlasting covenant with Abraham. If the Most High elected to destroy the Israelites, that means he broke his covenant with Abraham. It is the only reason why there is salvation for them. It is the only reason they receive Yahawashi. Romans chapter 11 verse 6 is not Paul abolishing the law as if he could. It is Paul exalting Yahweh's decree over human merit. The remnant exists because the Most High willed it. Grace does not replace covenant, it enforces it. This is the book of Jeremiah, chapter 31, verse 1 through 3, and it reads, "At the same time saith Yahweh, will I be the God of all the families of Israel, and they shall be my people. Thus saith Yahweh, the people which were left of the sword found grace in the wilderness, even Israel, when I went to cause him to rest. Yahweh had appeared of old unto me, saying, Yeah, I have loved thee with an everlasting love. Therefore with loving kindness have I drawn thee." Jeremiah 31 opens with Yahweh saying that at the same time, the same period tied to Israel's restoration, he will be the God of all the families of Yasha'Allah, and they will be his people. This reiterates national identity and covenant continuity, not replacement, not abandonment, not seeking a place to add amendments. Then verse 2 says, "The people which were left of the sword found grace in the wilderness," a direct reference to Yahweh preserving the Israelites after judgment. Two big connections in Romans 11 begin to stand out. First, Jeremiah 31:1 matches Paul's claim that the Israelites remain Yahweh's people. Paul asks in the same verse, "Has God cast away his people?" and answers no. Jeremiah already stated that when restoration comes, Yahweh is still the God of the Israelites, and Yasha'Allah is still his people. The covenant relationship is unchanged and unamended. Jeremiah says the survivals, the preserved group, found grace. Paul calls the remnant a remnant according to grace. The wording and idea match exactly. The Israelites survive because Yahweh preserves them, not because they saved themselves. Jeremiah gives the historical pattern. Paul gives the theological explanation, and verse 3 takes it home. Why? Jeremiah 31:3 is the emotional and covenantal core behind everything Paul is saying in Romans 11. Jeremiah records appearing to Israel and saying, "Yeah, I have loved thee with an everlasting love. Therefore with loving kindness have I drawn thee." That one statement explains the entire doctrine of election, from the Torah to the prophets to Paul's epistles. It is not random. It's not conditional on performance, even though they will be doing good works when they are restored. It's not something that the Israelites earned. It's not based on merit. It's rooted in love, everlasting and covenant love. The same love, he says in Deuteronomy, as the reason why he chose them, because Yahweh loved you. The love is the engine of the remnant, the reason Yahweh keeps drawing the Israelites back generation after generation. And just as Noah found grace before judgment, so too does a faithful remnant exist in every generation of the Israelites. The principle is congruent. Replacement theology collapses under this truth. And the covenant stands because Yahweh's love stands, and his promises cannot fail. This is the book of Romans, chapter 11, verse 7 and 8, and it reads, "What then? Israel had not obtained that which it seeketh for, but the election hath obtained it, and the rest were blinded. According as it is written, God had given them the spirit of slumber, eyes that they should not see, and ears that they should not hear unto this day." Apostle Paul continues his exposition on the Israelites' condition by confronting a critical reality. The nation in its majority did not obtain what it sought. The Israelites sought redemption, blessings, and the fulfillment of promises, yet the visible result in Paul's generation was one of rejection and blindness. This was not because Yahweh had cast off his people, but because most of the Israelites had hardened itself through unbelief and disobedience. In contrast, the election had obtained what they sought. This election refers to the remnant, the faithful portion preserved by Yahweh's grace, a continuation of the covenant line that demonstrates unmistakably that the Israelites have not been rejected. The remnant stands as living evidence that Yahweh's promises to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob remain unbroken. Paul quotes Isaiah when speaking about the spiritual blindness. That blindness that Paul is speaking of wasn't a temporary lapse, a moment of confusion, or a minor misunderstanding. It was judgment, a divine shutting of the eyes. And proof that it was judgment is that it persisted even until Paul's day, into the era of the apostles, and it still persists today among the majority of our people. That same spirit of slumber that fell on the forefathers in the wilderness, the same dullness that gripped the kingdom under the prophets, is the same spiritual coma that keeps many Israelites today from recognizing Yahawashi as the promised Messiah. Not because Yahawashi is unclear, not because the scriptures are ambiguous, but because Yahweh himself have closed their eyes. This is the book of Isaiah chapter 6, verse 9 and 10, and it reads, "And he said, Go and tell this people, hear ye indeed, but understand not, and see ye indeed, but perceive not. Make the heart of this people fat, and make their ears heavy, and shut their eyes, lest they see with their eyes, and hear with their ears, and understand with their heart, and convert and be healed." You see it even now, brothers who love the law and proclaim Torah and boast in Moses, yet when confronted with Yahawashi's role, mission, identity, and authority, they respond just like the ancient Pharisees. They stumble at the very cornerstone they claim to believe in. They can break down prophecies about David, but they cannot see David's Lord. They can quote Isaiah, but cannot recognize the man Isaiah described. They can lecture on covenant history, but cannot discern the one sent to restore the covenant people. This is evidence of Paul's statement until this day. This is the book of Romans, chapter 11, verse 9 and 10, and it reads, "And David saith, Let their table be made a snare, and a trap, and a stumbling block, and a recompense unto them. Let their eyes be darkened, that they may not see, and bow down their back always." Romans 11:9 is Paul turning to David to explain why the majority of the Israelites are blinded in this season. He quotes from Psalm 69, where David speaks about the table of the wicked becoming a snare and a trap. In that psalm, the table represents blessings, security, prosperity, things that should have been signs of favor. But because the people hardened themselves, those same blessings turned into judgment. Paul applies that to his generation. The very things that the Israelites trusted in, the temple, the sacrifices, the outward forms of worship, their national status, it became a stumbling block because they pursued righteousness without the obedience of faith. What should have led them to Yahweh instead became something that blinded them. Their comforts turned into a trap, their rituals into a snare, and their confidence into darkness. But notice what Paul is not saying. He is not saying that the Israelites have been rejected, nor is he saying their blindness is permanent. He is explaining that this judgment of blindness is the simple pattern the scriptures have always shown. When the Israelites harden their heart, Yahweh gives them over to what they trust in, and the very thing becomes their stumbling. And this is exactly what happened in the days of Isaiah, Jeremiah, and David. The elect remnant sees, the rest stumble, but the people remain his. The blindness is judgment, not rejection. This is the book of Romans, chapter 11, verse 11, and it reads, I say then, have they stumbled that they shall fall? God forbid. But rather through their fall, salvation is come unto the Gentiles, for to provoke them to jealousy. The first thing Paul does is shut down the idea that the Israelites stumbling, the blindness, the slumber, the rejection of Yahawashi meant a total national collapse. The question he asks is rhetorical. Did the Israelites stumble that they would be completely cast off, erased, and replaced? The answer is emphatic. God forbid. Absolutely not. Paul shuts the door on replacement theology with one sentence. The Israelites' stumbling was never meant to be final. Yahweh never attended that at all. It was temporary judicial condition, not a permanent displacement. But here's the key though. Through their fall, something opened up. A door, perhaps. Not salvation for the nations the way Christianity teaches it, but rather the awakening and the restoration of the scattered Israelites living among the nations, the very people Paul calls Gentiles. Their awakening was triggered precisely because the Jews who rejected Yahawashi left a spiritual vacuum. So, did the Most High provoke them with allowing heathens into the covenant? The previous chapter gave us the blueprint of the provoking. This is the book of Romans, chapter 10, verse 19, and it reads, But I say, did Israel know? First, Moses saith, I will provoke you to jealousy by them that are no people. By a foolish nation will I anger you. They were provoked by a no people, by a people considered not a people. If Yahawashi was appointed to redeem them from this curse of the law and to allow this not a people into the covenant fold, then the law has to be the linchpin on which we understand why and how they were provoked to jealousy. At the same time, the law serves as the platform for discerning the true identity of those who were brought in. And that's the place where people fall astray in trying to unlock Paul's epistles. This is the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 32, verse 21, and it reads, They have moved me to jealousy with that which is not God. They have provoked me to anger with their vanities, and I will move them to jealousy with those which are not a people. I will provoke them to anger with a foolish nation. Deuteronomy 32:21 is the backbone of what Paul is talking about in Romans 10 and 11. He isn't inventing a doctrine. He is showing the fulfillment of prophecy. Yahweh spoke centuries earlier. The Israelites provoked Yahweh through idol worship, not once, but repeatedly, generation after generation. So Yahweh declared the judgment. I will provoke them to jealousy with those who are not a people. Now, the Christian world reads this and imagine Yahweh is talking about heathens. And unfortunately, some of those who are in the truth have fell victim to this spell. But that makes no sense because heathens were never considered not a people relative to the Israelites. Nations like Assyria, Moab, Ammon, Philistia, and Edom, they were always recognized nations with kings and borders and histories and identities. They were a people. So who then? Who were the not a people? This is the book of Hosea, chapter 1, verse 8 and 9, and it reads, Now when she had weaned Lo-ruhamah, she conceived and bare a son. Then said God, Call his name Lo-ammi, for ye are not my people, and I will not be your God. In Hosea chapter 1, verse 8 and 9, Yahweh tells the prophet to name the child Lo-ammi, meaning not my people, and explains, For ye are not my people, and I will not be your God. This is the covenant turned on its head. Ephraim, the northern kingdom, were the only people biblically who were disowned and called not a people by God himself. And if you aren't his people anymore, what are you? A heathen, a ban nakar in the Hebrew. It is Yahweh declaring what the curses of Deuteronomy warned. If Israelites break the covenant, they will experience abandonment, alienation, and disowning. Judah, by and large, rejected Yahawashi, so the gospel went to those who were not a people. A lost children of the diaspora would accept it, and through their acceptance, Judah would be provoked. The foolish nation is the scattered northern kingdom and remnants of Judites, lost in idolatry, customs of the heathen, and cut off from heritage. Yet they're still beloved for the Father's sake and still destined to be restored. The gospel had to reach the rest of the tribes who were still buried in the nations, cut off from covenant memory, living as heathens, being called the uncircumcision, counted as Gentiles, but still Israelites according to the flesh. And Apostle Peter, the chief apostle, shows the confirmation of this prophecy in action. This is the book of 1 Peter chapter 2 verse 9 and 10, and it reads, But ye are a chosen generation, a royal priesthood, and holy nation, a peculiar people, which in time past were not a people, but are now the people of God, which had not obtained mercy, but now have obtained mercy. Peter is speaking to Israelites living in foreign lands, i.e., strangers. Israelites who were lost and detached from their heritage and identity, alienated from the commonwealth. Israelites considered not a people, Israelites who needed to be restored. The same audience that Paul calls Gentiles in condition, not in biology. When Peter says, which in time past were not a people, but are now the people of God, it's a direct fulfillment. partial fulfillment of Hosea. Every phrase here is Old Testament language about the Israelites, a chosen generation. That's Isaiah 44. A royal priesthood. That's Exodus 40, Numbers 25. A holy nation. That's Exodus 19 and 6. A peculiar people. That's Exodus 19:5, Exodus 14:2, Exodus 26:18. These titles were never given to the heathens. Yahweh never called the nations holy. He never declared them his peculiar people. He never established them as the royal priesthood. Peter is restoring identity to Israelites who lost theirs, with Yahawashi being the opened door. I hope it's making sense. This is the book of Romans, chapter 11, verse 12, and it reads, "Now if the fall of them be the riches of the world, and the diminishing of them the riches of the Gentiles, how much more their fullness?" Paul is transitioning into the consequences of the Israelites breaking the covenant, the reason why they are at the bottom. And because the covenant was binding, Yahweh himself orchestrated the Israelites' fall as judgment. And by that fall, the nations were allowed to rise, flourish, and gain power. Nothing Paul says here can be understood apart from Torah. He is drawing directly from Deuteronomy, from the covenant curses, and from the Israelites' historical trajectory. The fall of the Israelites was prophesied to be the vehicle by which the heathen nations would prosper and achieve wealth according to the law itself. When Paul says the Israelites fall, their stumbling, blindness, and diminishing, that it brought riches to the world and to the Gentiles, he isn't introducing a new theological idea. He is describing what the Torah already said would happen when the Israelites broke the covenant. The stumbling, the captivity, the idolatry, the branches falling off, the rejection of Yahawashi, and the heathen rising to prominence in the earth. And Paul himself speaking on those things as he is a witness of it in real time. This is the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 28, verse 43 and 44, and it reads, "And the stranger that is within thee shall get up very high above thee, and thou shalt come down very low, and he shall lend to thee, and thou shalt not lend to him. He shall be the head, and thou shalt be the tail." Barakatah Yahweh, he himself orchestrated this fall as a judgment for covenant breaking. At this time in the first century, the Romans are in rule. The Israelites are at the bottom, and Esau sits on David's throne wearing fringes and calling themselves Jews. Israel, the Israelites would become the tail. The nations would become the head. The Israelites would serve their enemies. The heathen would grow wealthy off of the Israelites' labor, land, inventions, bodies, and captivity. And the nations would rise in power while the Israelites declined. This is exactly what we see in biblical history and in real history, because Yahweh himself engineered the fall, and the nations prospered only by his design, not because they are righteous, chosen, or special. Every world empire, Assyria, Babylon, Persia, Greece, and Rome, even America and Europe, they rose to power at the expense of the Israelites' fall. They became wealthy, stable, and dominant because the Israelites were scattered, oppressed, and punished. This is the very riches of the Gentiles Paul is referencing. In 2nd Esdras chapter 6 verse 59, Ezra is complaining to the Most High about the prosperity of the heathen. And this is what he said: if the world be made for our sakes, why do we not possess an inheritance with the world? How long shall this endure? Riches in the world. Ezra is asking the same question Paul answers. Why are the nations prospering? Why are the Israelites impoverished? Why is the world enjoying the inheritance originally meant for the Israelites? How long will the Israelites remain diminished while the Gentiles grow rich? Paul's statement in Romans 11 and 12 is addressing the same covenant reality. The Israelites' fall is not just spiritual, it's historical, political, and economic. Yahweh made Israel weak, scattered, and subjugated. Yahweh made the nation strong, wealthy, and elevated, just as the curses said. This has nothing to do with heathens being saved or spiritual adoption. This is the book of Lamentations, chapter 2, verse 15 through 17 in the NLT, and it reads, all who pass by jeer at you. They scoff and insult beautiful Jerusalem, saying, is this the city called most beautiful in all the world, and the joy of all the earth? All your enemies mock you. They scoff and snarl and say, we have destroyed her at last. We have long waited for this day. It is finally here. But it is Yahweh who did just as he planned. He has fulfilled the promises of disaster he made long ago. He has destroyed Jerusalem without mercy. He has caused her enemies to gloat over her, and he has given them power over her. In Lamentations, the nations stand around Jerusalem in triumph, literally rejoicing, clapping their hands, hissing and mocking the downfall of the city that was once the perfection of beauty. Their reaction makes something crystal clear. The Israelites' fall become their opportunity. The destruction of Jerusalem opens space for the surrounding nations to rise in confidence, wealth, security, and political dominance. Verse 16 shows them rejoicing, saying, certainly this is the day we looked for. We have found, we have seen it. They benefit from the collapse. Their joy is rooted in Israelites' suffering, because the vacuum created by the Israelites' fall becomes the stage on which their own power grows. This is the book of Romans, chapter 11, verse 13 and 14, and it reads, for I speak to you Gentiles, inasmuch as I am the apostle of the Gentiles, I magnify mine office. And if by any means I may provoke to immolation them which are my flesh, and might save some of them. This is where people get totally lost if you didn't watch what just happened. Paul just used the word Gentiles in 3 different contexts in 3 consecutive verses. The only way to understand what he's saying is context. In verse 11, he's talking about scattered Israelites. In verse 12, he's emphasizing the rise of the heathen, the riches of the Gentiles. And right here, he begins speaking directly to the diaspora Israelites in the very church he's writing to, explaining why he was sent to them and what Yahweh was doing through their awakening. He's emphasizing the importance of his own mission. Not just the northern kingdom tribes, the scattered tribes, the one scattered by Assyria, but also they, the ones living in Greek and Roman provinces. They are fallen Judites, fallen Benjamites, fallen Levites, and they were the key to Yahweh's plan to restore the Israelites. Paul magnifies his office because his mission is delicate and prophetic to awaken the not a people, the fallen sons inside these Greek diaspora communities, because their awakening would accomplish something no priest, no Pharisee, or no scribe could achieve. It would provoke Judah to repentance, his own flesh, his kinsmen. Paul's mission wasn't to the nations for their benefit, but to the scattered Israelites among them, the people who are receiving this epistle, all for Judah's benefit. And that aligns with Ezekiel 37, Hosea 1, Hosea 2, Isaiah 11, Zechariah 10, with no contradictions. And this is why when Paul was on trial in Acts 27, verse 6 and 7, he says boldly, "And now I stand and am judged for the hope of the promise made of God unto our fathers, unto which promise our 12 tribes, instantly serving God day and night, hope to come." The 12 tribes aren't waiting to be delivered with their enemies. He's saying, if you, scattered Israelites, wake up, repent, and return to the covenant through Yahawashi, then your return will provoke Judah to see that the Messiah is truly ours. Heavy. This is the book of Romans, chapter 11, verse 15, and it reads, "For if the casting away of them be the reconciling of the world, what shall the receiving of them be but life from the dead?" Again, Paul is using the word world in two different contexts. Paul's words in Romans 11:15 marks the high point of his argument about Israel's temporary judgment and ultimate restoration. He's not talking about heathens entering into the covenant. He's saying if their fall triggered the reconciliation of the scattered, then their full restoration will be the complete revival of the nation. The word world here refers to the scattered Israelite world, the tribes dispersed among the nations, counted as Gentiles because of covenant loss. Their reconciliation means their return to Yahweh through Yahawashi, fulfilling Hosea's prophecy that those called not my people would once again be his people, reconciling of the world. This same language appears in Paul's other epistles. It's not like I'm making it up. This is where Paul explains that Yahweh was in Yahawashi, reconciling the world to himself in 2 Corinthians 5:18 and 19. Not imputing their trespasses. Heathens didn't trespass Yahweh, the Israelites did. And this is the covenant restoration for those alienated by disobedience. This is not a universal salvation for all nations. This is the book of 1 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 18 and 19. "And all things are of God, who had reconciled us to himself by Jesus Christ, Hamashiach Yahawashi, and had given to us the ministry of reconciliation, to wit, that God was in Christ, reconciling the world unto himself, not imputing their trespasses unto them, and had committed unto us the word of reconciliation." Heathens didn't transgress the covenant. They weren't in it. So the casting away of Judah and the blindness of the Israelites opened the door for the gospel to reach all these lost tribes. And that is the reconciling Paul is speaking of, the restoration of covenant relationship for those who were alienated. But then He points to something far greater, the receiving of them. When all the Israelites are gathered and restored, it will be like life from the dead. This is Ezekiel 37 in action. The whole house of Israel resurrected from the grave of exile, standing as a mighty nation under Yahawashi. It is national resurrection, covenant renewal, and the fulfillment of every promise Yahweh made to the forefathers. The temporary fall enriched the nations, but the restoration of the Israelites will bring a glory and order that far surpasses anything the world has ever seen. This is the context that leads directly into Zechariah chapter 10, where Yahweh promises to strengthen Judah, save Joseph, and gather his people as though they were never been cast off. This is the book of Zechariah chapter 10 verse 6 through 9, and it reads, "And I will strengthen the house of Judah, and I will save the house of Joseph, and I will bring them again to place them, for I have mercy upon them, and they shall be as though I had not cast them off. For I am Yahweh their God, and will hear them, and they of Ephraim shall be like a mighty man, and their heart shall rejoice as through wine. Yeah, their children shall see it and be glad, and their heart shall rejoice in Yahweh. I will hiss for them and gather them, for I have redeemed them, and they shall increase as they have increased. And I will sow them among the people, and they shall remember me in far countries, and they shall live with their children and turn again." This prophecy provides a prophetic picture that aligns directly with what Paul's teaching in Romans 11:12 through 15. It's about the Israelites' temporary fall and ultimate restoration. In these verses, Yahweh promises to restore and strengthen the Israelites, regathering them from the nations where they have been scattered. He declares that he will strengthen them spiritually and politically, overturning the temporary reversal caused by their own disobedience, and reestablish them as leaders over the nations. This matches Paul's point that the Israelites' fall enriched the Gentiles. The nations benefited while the Israelites were diminished. Zechariah shows the reversal. The Israelites will no longer be the tail, but will rise to prominence, with Yahweh actively bringing them back to a position of authority and blessing. The scattered people are gathered, their strength renewed, and them positioned to exercise influence over the very nations that once oppressed them. The imagery of Zechariah 10 emphasizes that the Israelites' restoration is not just spiritual or symbolic, it's historical, national, and political, which mirrors Paul's life from the dead language. The full restoration surpasses the temporary gain of the heathen during the Israelites' fall. It brings order and a covenant fulfillment on a far greater scale. This is the book of Romans, chapter 11, verse 16, and it reads, "For if the first fruit be holy, the lump is also holy. And if the root be holy, so are the branches." Paul's words in Romans 11:16, it establishes the foundation for his olive tree analogy. The first fruit represents Yahawashi, the holy, consecrated one who rose as the firstborn from the dead. That's 2 Corinthians 15. Resurrected, perfected, and faithful. His holiness sanctifies the entire lump, which is the Israelites, the whole nation, all those called according to the covenant. The lump isn't all of a sudden humanity. The covenant never fails because Yahawashi as the first fruit validates it. This is Torah language. How could this apply to anyone else? The Israelites' covenant identity does not collapse because of human failure. It stands because the root, the promises of Yahweh, and the faithfulness of Yahawashi is holy. And if the root is holy, then the branches connected to it retain their covenant significance, even if some are broken off for unbelief. The holiness of the first fruit establishes the holiness and preservation of the remnant and guarantees the eventual restoration of the whole. This is more than symbolic. It shows that the Israelites' covenant identity is rooted in Yahweh's election and promise, not in human perfection. Yahawashi as the first fruit is proof that the covenant has not failed. His resurrection and faithfulness sanctify the Israelites' position before the throne of Yahweh. This is the book of Romans chapter 11 verse 17, and it reads, "And if some of the branches be broken off, and thou being a wild olive tree were grafted in among them, and with them partakest of the root and the fatness of the olive tree." Paul moves to the olive tree imagery in verse 17. Some branches were broken off, Judites who rejected Yahawashi in unbelief, and you, being a wild olive tree, were grafted in among them. This is where the context matters. The wild olive tree does not refer to random heathens, but to Israelites who have become estranged, living as Gentiles in foreign lands and detached from covenant life. They were wild because they had lost their cultivated identity, yet they were still of the same stock. They still grew from an olive seed. They just grew wild, but the tree remains Israelites. Paul says these grafted in branches now partake of the root and fatness of the olive tree, the blessings, the promises rooted in Yahweh's election. This is the book of Jeremiah, chapter 11, verse 16. Yahweh called thy name a green olive tree, fair and of goodly fruit. With the noise of a great tumult, he had kindled fire upon it, and the branches of it are broken. Jeremiah 11:16 confirms the metaphor. Yahweh called thy name a green olive tree, fair and of goodly fruit, but the branches of it are broken. The Israelites are the olive tree in its natural state. The root remains holy, but the branches can be broken off through rebellion. Paul is not describing a new tree that has apples and peaches and pears, or a replacement. He is describing a restored tree. The tree are the Israelites. The root is Yahweh's covenant with the forefathers and the promises, and the fatness is the richness of his promises. Some branches fell, others are being grafted back in, and the entire process points to the eventual fullness, when the Israelites are finally restored. And this verse perfectly aligns with Romans 11, 16, and 17. The root is holy. Yahweh's promises and election ultimately fulfilled in Yahawashi as the first fruit. The branches are the tribes. Some remain faithful, some are broken off due to unbelief, and others are grafted in among them, sharing in the root's nourishment. Remember in Jeremiah 11, it says, Yahweh had called thy name a green olive tree. You show me anywhere in the pericope where Yahweh says a heathen who believes in Yahawashi or Jesus is all of a sudden an olive tree. This is the book of Romans chapter 11 verse 18 and 19, and it reads, boast not against the branches, but if thou boast, thou bearest not the root, but the root thee. Thou wilt say, the branches were broken off that I might be grafted in. Paul's warning in these two verses are sharp and very necessary. Boast not against the branches, but if thou boast, thou bearest not the root, but the root thee. He's addressing these Israelites among the diaspora who were being grafted back into covenant favor. Some of them might assume that Judah's rejection of Yahawashi meant that they were now superior or chosen instead of their brothers. Paul dismantles that thinking immediately. The root, the covenant promises, the patriarchs, and ultimately Yahawashi as the first fruit supports them, not the other way around. Attacking any arrogance forgets that their restoration is mercy, not merit. Pride in restoration risks the same judgment that fell upon the natural branches. This is the equivalent of a so-called priest in this day rejecting Paul's letters when Paul is among the natural branches. That's a boast against the branches in live in color. This is the book of Romans chapter 11 verse 20 and 21. Well, because of unbelief they were broken off, and thou standest by faith. Be not high-minded, but fear. For if God spared not the natural branches, take heed lest he also spare not thee. Why fear? Number one, because the core tenet of the covenant with Yahweh is fear. Deuteronomy 10 and 12, Deuteronomy 6 and 13, Proverbs 9 and 10. Because the same God who judged the natural branches for unbelief can judge those restored if they fall into pride or disobedience. This is not about heathens replacing the Israelites. It's about Yahweh dealing with both houses, Judah and Ephraim. According to covenant standards, the olive tree remains the Israelites. The branches are the Israelites. Some broken off, some of the tribes. Some preserved, some grafted back in. Yahweh's dealings show no favoritism, no respect of persons in judgment. That is Torah law. His severity and goodness operate within his own people. This is the book of Romans chapter 11 verse 22 and 23. Behold therefore the goodness and severity of Yahweh on them which fell, severity, but toward thee goodness, if thou continue in his goodness. Otherwise thou also shalt be cut off. And they also, if they abide not still in unbelief, shall be grafted in, for the Most High is able to graft them in again. Paul sets up a dual principle. God is both good and severe. And this echoes Prophet Nehemiah, the one who calls the Most High great and terrible. This is not a discussion about heathens entering into covenant. It's entirely about the Israelites. The severity fell on those who broke faith. The northern kingdom scattered for idolatry. The southern kingdom, humbled by Babylon, is scattered. And Judah's unbelief in Paul's day in Yahawashi. Yahweh does not hesitate to discipline his own people when covenant is violated. The goodness shown to those being grafted in, the dispersed Israelites among the nations, is an act of mercy, but it comes with a condition: continue in his goodness. That goodness is covenant faithfulness, obedience, and allegiance to Yahawashi. Paul is clear: heathens were never cut off, so they can never be grafted in. The entire process is Yahweh restoring his people, testing them by grace and judging them by covenant standards. Those broken off, the Judites who rejected Messiah, are not beyond hope. Paul insists they can be grafted back if they abandon unbelief. Yahweh's power is absolute. Restoration is not only possible, it is guaranteed for those who repent. This is the book of Hosea, chapter 14, verse 4 through 6. And I will heal their backsliding, and I will love them freely, for mine anger is turned away from him, and I will be as the dew unto Israel. He shall grow as the lily, and cast forth his roots as Lebanon. His branches shall spread, and his beauty shall be as the olive tree, and his smell as Lebanon. The same olive tree imagery Paul uses is rooted in the prophets. Both passages declare that Yahweh's judgment is real, but his mercy is greater. Repentance brings renewal, flourishing, and covenant blessing. The olive tree remains the Israelites. The root remains holy, and the promise of restoration stands firm for every branch willing to return. This is the book of Romans, chapter 11, verse 24, and it reads, For if thou wert cut off out of the olive tree, which is wild by nature, and were grafted contrary to nature into a good olive tree, how much more shall these, which be the natural branches, be grafted into their own olive tree? The wild branches are not all of a sudden foreign nations. These are Israelite, the tribes who abandoned Yahweh's covenant and became estranged. Mostly remnants of the northern kingdom, but also scattered Judites who were Hellenized and absorbed into heathen customs. Their wildness reflects idolatry, rebellion, not ethnicity. They are Israelites by blood, but wild because they lived as Gentiles, detached from covenant life. Paul emphasizes that their grafting back is contrary to nature, meaning they walked contrary to the original covenant, as stated in Leviticus 26, 21 through 33. Context. But Yahweh's mercy overrides the natural consequence of covenant breaking. Restoration is possible because Yahweh can heal even those who fell deepest into disobedience. The good olive tree represents covenant obedience, the cultivated life of the Israelites under Yahweh's commandments. Being grafted back means returning to that covenant life through Yahawashi. not replacing it with a foreign identity. Paul makes his strongest point. If Yahweh can restore those who became wild, how much more can he restore the natural branches? The Judites who kept the commandments, but they rejected Yahawashi. Their grafting back is not miraculous, it's natural and expected because they never abandoned the covenant itself. Their blindness delayed recognition of the Messiah, but their obedience kept them connected to the root. This proves that the olive tree remains Israelites. The root remains holy, and Yahweh's promises stand firm. Restoration is not random, it is covenantal, and it will culminate in the fullness of the Israelites when every branch, wild and natural, is grafted back into its own tree. The olive tree represents national and covenant based Israelites, not a multi ethnic Gentile church. They are literally not even mentioned anywhere in the chapter itself. These heathens just simply appropriated it. This is the book of Romans, chapter 11, verse 25 and 26. For I would not, brethren, that ye shall be ignorant of this mystery, lest ye should be wise in your own conceit. That blindness in part is happened to Israel until the fullness of the Gentiles be come in. And so all Israel shall be saved, as it is written, not as it's amended. There shall come out of Zion the deliverer, and he shall turn away ungodliness from Jacob. Paul begins by addressing his audience, brothers, emphasizing that he is speaking to Israelites, not heathens. His words in verse 25 and 26 unlock the heart of the mystery he has been building toward. Blindness in part is happened to the Israelites until the fullness of the Gentiles be come in. And so all the Israelites shall be saved. This is not a mystical concept or a new doctrine. It is a prophetic plan Yahweh revealed from the beginning. The blindness is partial and temporary, affecting a portion of the Israelites so that the covenant promise can unfold at its appointed order. The phrase fullness of the Gentiles is the key, and it does not mean the conversion of heathen nations. It points directly to an end time prophecy given in Genesis 48:19, where Jacob prophesied over Ephraim. This is the book of Genesis, chapter 48, verse 17 through 19. And when Joseph saw his father laid his right hand upon the head of Ephraim, it displeased him, and he held up his father's hand to remove it from Ephraim's head unto Manasseh's head. And Joseph said unto his father, Not so, my father, for this is the firstborn. Put thy right hand upon his head. And his father refused and said, I know it, my son, I know it. He also shall become a people, and he shall be great, but truly his younger brother shall be greater than he, and his seed shall become a multitude of nations. And this is the ultimate dagger to Christian apologists and Hebrew Christianites struggling with Paul's epistles. Genesis 48:19 sits at the foundation of everything Paul has been explaining in this chapter because it establishes an end-time prophetic destiny of Ephraim, the northern tribes, to become a multitude of nations. In the Hebrew, In the Hebrew, multitude of nations is Melo Hagoyim, or in the ancient Hebrew, Mala Hagoyim, and it means the fullness of nations or the fullness of the Gentiles. Paul is drawing on this prophecy to explain that the scattered northern kingdom, absorbed among the nations and appearing as Gentiles, must come to its fullness before the final restoration. Paul, several millennia ago, understood the end given from the beginning, and that is rooted in the very subject he spent his life upholding and protecting, the law. And this is why Paul calls them Gentiles, not because they are non-Israelites, but because they live in a Gentile condition, stripped of covenant identity and swallowed into foreign cultures. Their awakening fulfills Jacob's blessing over Ephraim, a people hidden among the nations, destined to rise again. When Paul says all Israel shall be saved, he is declaring the end of the process. Judah and Ephraim united, blindness removed, ungodliness turned away from Jacob. Why is this even important? Because in the time of Yahawashi, when he walked the earth, the northern kingdom were already scattered to a part of the earth where never mankind dwelt. That's 2 Esdras 13. And only a remnant even got to encounter him. So they never got a chance to even see Yahawashi. And that's why the word has to be given unto them so they can come out of blindness and accept Yahawashi as the Messiah. The deliverer comes out of Zion to complete what was promised, the restoration of the whole house of Yasha'Allah. This is Ezekiel 37 again. Two sticks becoming one, the dead bones rise into life. This is not replacement theology. It is covenant fulfillment. The fullness of the Gentiles coming in is talking about Ephraim. The mystery is not about outsiders joining the Israelites or taking their covenant because Israel failed and now it's open to everybody. It's a lie. It's all about the Israelites being gathered from every corner of the earth, restored to covenant, and redeemed through Yahawashi. Also, the term brethren is unmistakably covenantal in the scriptures. This is the book of Ezekiel, chapter 11, verse 15. Son of man, thy brethren, even thy brethren, the men of thy kindred, and all the house of Israel holy, are they unto whom the inhabitants of Jerusalem have said, get ye far from Yahweh, unto us this land is given in possession. Paul uses the term brethren to remind the brothers of the church in Rome of the same truth. The blindness or rebellion of part of the Israelites does not remove their covenantal status. The same term, brethren or brother, is rooted in the law, like in Deuteronomy 15, verse 12. For an example, this term is never generic. It signals shared covenant identity. The term has been consistent throughout history. The Lacedaemonians were called their brethren, as they were the stock of Abraham too. Like in 2 Maccabees chapter 1 verse 1, it says, the brethren, the Jews that be in Jerusalem and in the land of Judea, wish unto the brethren, the Jews that are throughout Egypt, health and peace. Paul maintains this continuity Addressing Israelites in the diaspora, not heathens, Paul is reminding his audience, the Israelites in the dispersion, that blindness affecting part of the Israelites does not erase their status as Yahweh's people. Even those who seem far from him, whether through idolatry or unbelief, remain within the covenant framework because Yahweh himself determines belonging, not appearances or current disobedience. Romans 11:25 and 26 frame this blindness as temporary and purposeful. It is a divine measure to prevent arrogance and misunderstanding while Yahweh's plan unfolds. The blindness lasts only until the fullness of the Gentiles come in, a phrase rooted in Genesis 48, where Jacob prophesied, Ephraim's seed will become a multitude of nations. And this is not about heathens entering into the covenant. It is about the scattered northern tribes reaching their appointed fullness before final restoration. And once that happens, all the Israelites shall be saved. The deliverer will come out of Zion and turn away all ungodliness from Jacob. Completing the covenant promise, the mystery Paul reveals is not replacement, but restoration. Judah and Ephraim reunited, blindness removed, and the covenant renewed in its fullness. This is the book of Isaiah, chapter 59, verse 20 and 21, and it reads, And the Redeemer shall come to Zion, and unto them that turn from transgression in Jacob, saith Yahweh. As for me, this is my covenant with them. Thus saith Yahweh, my spirit that is upon thee, and my words which I have put in thy mouth, shall not depart out of thy mouth, nor out of the mouth of thy seed, nor out of the mouth of thy seed's seed, saith Yahweh, from henceforth and forever. Isaiah 59 is the anchor for Paul's declaration. The Redeemer specifically comes to Zion and to those in Jacob who turn from transgression. This is the covenant, and it affirms that the blindness and scattering are temporary measures of discipline and not a permanent rejection. The deliverer's mission is to restore the covenant people who have been estranged, bringing them back into obedience and favor. Verse 21 of Isaiah, it seals the permanence of the covenant. His spirit and his word remain with his people and their seed forever. And this means even in judgment, exile, and blindness, the covenants cannot be annulled. The Israelites' rejection will turn into the Israelites' restoration. Their election is irrevocable because it rests on Yahweh's promise, not human performance, not heathens trying to take the covenant of a God which never chose them. Paul's teaching in Romans 11, it mirrors the pattern. Temporary blindness, preservation of a remnant, and ultimate restoration through the Redeemer. When Paul says all Israel shall be saved, he's echoing Isaiah's vision of national renewal. This is the book of Isaiah, chapter 45, verse 17, and it reads, But Israel shall be saved in Yahweh with an everlasting salvation. Ye shall not be ashamed nor confounded, world without end. And this verse is the cornerstone for understanding Paul's entire argument in Romans 11. It declares that salvation is everlasting, rooted in Yahweh's covenant, and cannot be overturned by temporary judgment or blindness. The phrase world without end emphasizes the permanence. The Israelites' election and covenant identity are eternal. Even in exile, even under discipline, Yahweh's promise stands. The Israelites will be saved in Him. Paul's statement about them being saved is not a new doctrine. He knows the prophets, as there was no New Testament at the time of this writing. It is a direct echo of Isaiah 45 and John 3:16 and John 18:20 while we're at it. The prophets consistently affirm this pattern: judgment for transgression, preservation for the remnant, and restoration of the whole nation. Isaiah makes it clear that this salvation is not conditional on the Israelites' perfection, but Yahweh's faithfulness to the everlasting covenant. This is the book of Romans, chapter 11, verse 27 and 28. For this is my covenant unto them, when I shall take away their sins. As concerning the gospel, they are enemies for your sakes, but as touching the election, they are beloved for the Father's sake. Verse 27 clearly ties remission of sins to Yahweh's covenant. This is the same covenant throughout the Torah and prophets. The covenant people are preserved because Yahweh forgives transgression, not because they earned it. And this aligns directly with Isaiah 59 and Hosea 14 and Jeremiah 31. The covenant ensures restoration. It's part of the promises. How do you partake of the promises when the curses are part of the promises? Judgment and restoration. You can't just open the book and be like, oh, I get all the glory and honor in heaven. The covenant is everlasting, and the taking away of sins is both the mechanism and proof of Yahweh's faithfulness to His covenant people. Verse 28 clarifies a tension Paul anticipates. Israel, because of unbelief, is presently the enemies in relation to the Gentiles. Their stumbling has allowed Yahweh to extend His plan to include scattered Israelites back into the fold. But yet they are beloved. They are beloved. Yahweh's love for the Israelites is unconditional and covenantal. It's not dependent on the Israelites' current disobedience or their obedience. His love has been there. Yahweh says, I will give nations for a ransom for thy life. So their election and identity remain intact even amid discipline. This is the book of Romans, chapter 11, verse 29 and 30. For the gifts and calling of God are without repentance. For as ye in times past have not believed, yet have now obtained mercy through their unbelief. This means Yahweh does not revoke His promises or election. The patriarchs, the covenant, and the covenant blessings remain intact even when the people disobey. Election is permanent because it is rooted in Yahweh's choice and covenant faithfulness, not in human error or failure. Paul notes that the Gentiles, the scattered Israelites, they benefit from the Israelites' disobedience, the Judites' disobedience. Israelites' idolatry and unbelief opened the door for them to come back according to Yahweh's plan. They are grafted into the covenant, the root, and receive blessing. And this is framed entirely through the context of the covenant. This is the book of Romans 11, verse 31 and 32. Even so have these also now not believed, that through your mercy they may also obtain mercy. For God has concluded them all in unbelief, that he might have mercy upon all. Even so have these also not believed, that through your mercy they may obtain mercy. Paul is speaking of the Israelites who are currently spiritually blind or disobedient. Their unbelief is real, yet it serves a divine purpose. Yahweh allows this temporary rebellion so that through the faithful remnant and the obedient branches they may be drawn back and restored. The mercy here is covenantal. It is the Israelites being preserved and grafted back into covenant life. It is not a universal salvation indiscriminately applied. This verse highlights that the preservation and obedience of some of the Israelites provide the means for others to be restored. The remnant, the natural branches, and even those temporary hardened, all play a role in manifesting Yahweh's mercy. It says, for God had concluded them all in unbelief, that he might have mercy upon them all. The term all here must be understood within the covenant context. Paul is not speaking about every individual on the earth who believe in Jesus. He's speaking of the Israelites as a nation, scattered, blinded in part, yet preserved by Yahweh. The unbelief of the Israelites served as a divine purpose. It allows Yahweh to exercise his mercy on all of them, to exercise his mercy in full, restoring the covenant people collectively. This process demonstrates justice, patience, and the unchanging commitment to the covenant, the house of Israel and the house of Judah, the same people whom the new covenant is given to. The plan is not arbitrary. Even the hardening, the scattering, and the blindness are orchestrated so that the fullness of his mercy can be realized in Yasha Allah according to his promises. This is the book of Romans chapter 11, verse 33 and 34, and it reads, "Oh, the depths of the riches of both the wisdom and knowledge of Yahweh! How unsearchable are his judgments, and his ways past finding out. For who had known the mind of Yahweh, or who had been his counselor?" This is a short hymn of praise to Yahweh, as Paul is reflecting on the unsearchable wisdom and justice of the Most High God. After carefully explaining the fall, the grafting in of the Gentiles, and the ultimate restoration of the Israelites, Paul steps back to marvel at the depth and complexity of Yahweh's plan, emphasizing that the riches of Yahweh's wisdom and knowledge, his judgments and his ways are so profound that they cannot fully be grasped by human understanding until he allots the understanding through his Holy Spirit. Verse 34 says, "For who had known the mind of Yahweh, or who had been his counselor?" This is one of my favorite verses. Not in the chapter that Paul written. This is a direct quotation from Isaiah 40:13, something I bring out often. By quoting Isaiah, Paul is grounding his argument in prophecy. Isaiah 40 speaks of Yahweh's incomparable wisdom, sovereignty, and power. His understanding is beyond human comprehension. Humans cannot dictate, advise, or alter Yahweh's purposes. They can only recognize the wisdom. It also says in that chapter that he shall guide the lambs and hold them close to his bosom. That chapter is also a chapter about the Israelites' restoration. By quoting this chapter and verse, Paul is not speaking hypothetically. He is linking his teaching on the Israelites and the scattered Israelites directly to the covenantal and prophetic witness, showing continuity from the Torah and the prophets through the writings. Verse 35 and 36 of Romans 11, it says, "Or who hath first given to him, and it shall be recompensed unto him again. For of him, and through him, and to him are all things, to whom be glory forever. Amen." In short, Romans 11 confirms these essential precepts, these essential promises. The Israelites' fall was covenantal, not accidental. Every major empire rose at their expense. The Israelites' election is irrevocable. It also shows that the fall of them equates to the riches of the world. The casting away of them brought in the reconciling of those who were first cast away. The olive tree, the metaphor pertaining to the Israelites. The covenant guarantees restoration. It also shows the fullness of the Gentiles, what it actually means, because it's rooted in prophecy. And it also shows that the Israelites' covenant identity is permanent because the root is holy. It also shows the broken branches are a consequence of unbelief, and the grafting in is the restoration of those branches, not replacement. And finally, that fear and humility are required for the restored branches, because Yahweh's covenant standards apply equally to all Israelites, for there is no respect of persons. The narrative is not about heathens replacing Israelites. It's about the Israelites returning to covenant life, whether through the preserved remnant or the restored scattered branches, and with Yahawashi being the first fruit that anchors all of it. This is one of the hardest chapters to break down, and you're not going to get it unless Yahweh has appointed you the understanding. And because you have brothers in this truth who are more concerned by being seen of men and recognized as scholarly, they can't get it to the point where they're willing to change an entire doctrine because they can't understand Paul. That is insane work. You have brothers who started out by debating, is the Most High God racist, to changing their whole entire doctrine to Gentiles being saved. I thought he was racist. A double-minded man is unstable in all his ways. These brothers need to repent and go back to seeking Yahweh's counsel. But the Most High, it seems like he's removed the spirit of hearing and understanding. And you can tell that when they converse with their own brethren in the truth. The brothers can't even get a word out because they're not listening in fellowship. They're preparing their rebuttal before even understanding. And that's what we have today amongst us. If it be Yahweh's will, they'll be restored and renewed. The work of the elders who came before us, their work is not in vain. The framework of which the covenant hangs on and what they taught to us is still in motion, and it's still the truth. The truth did not change because some bug outs lacked understanding. This Romans 11 breakdown stands as one of the most covenantally consistent structures I've ever produced through Yahawashi, because it accomplishes exactly what Paul intended. Every statement anchored in the Torah, the prophets, and the promises made to the forefathers without introducing foreign theology, heathen interpretation, or replacement concepts. This approach is firmly rooted in the divine word of Yahweh because it honors the prophetic pattern: judgment, scattering, preservation, restoration. It does not contradict the law or the prophets, it fulfills them. I've demonstrated that the mystery that Paul speaks of is not heathen inclusion. I've traced the origins and the consistency of Yahweh's extension of grace, even going back to Noah. I've shown the historical record of him preserving a remnant during judgment and identified who the elect truly are. I've thoroughly explained the olive tree imagery, revealing the continuity rather than the replacement or the adding in of foreign branches who come from other trees. I've grounded it in Yahweh's covenant. I have dismantled the common error of spiritualizing heathens as believing Gentiles, and I've tied Paul's language of reconciliation to covenant restoration, which is the true gospel, and sealed it all with the ultimate endgame: Yahawashi coming to remove ungodliness from Jacob. It is irrefutable once you hold Yahweh's words as the anchor and understand that no one can alter or add amendments to his declaration, which is why Paul quotes Isaiah 40:13 at the end: who had given unto him understanding, who had been his counselor, who had known the mind of Yahweh. It is all anchored. So, as the book of Isaiah 43:13 declares, yeah, before the day was, I am he, and there is none that can deliver out of my hands. The Most High says, I will work, and who shall let it? And that is one of my favorite scriptures in the whole book. I will work, and who shall let it? How dare you think you can give an authorization to something that I am going to do? I'm doing it. Who shall let it? Fix your face and put your hand in the air. And in closing, brothers, hear this and hold it deep. The story of the Israelites' fall is not defeat, but a stage in the covenant plan. The scattering, the blindness, the temporary elevation of the nations, all of it serves Yahweh's unshakable promise. The root remains holy, the olive tree remains Israelites, and the branches, the tribes, whether broken, wild, or grafted, are all a part of the path to restoration. Remember this: the mercy and the goodness of Yahweh are never random. His severity is never unjust. Every exile, every trial, every moment of apparent loss is the covenant working in full, preparing the scattered, humbling the proud, and ultimately bringing life back from the dead to the whole house of Yasha'Allah. Let your hearts not be high-minded. Let fear and reverence guide your steps. Obedience, covenant allegiance, and faith in Yahawashi are the way back to fullness promised since the days of the patriarchs. What was lost in blindness will be restored in glory. What was diminished among the nations will rise to its appointed prominence. All the Israelites shall be saved. The deliverer shall come out of Zion, and ungodliness shall be turned from Jacob. Hold fast, teach diligently, and walk in the covenant. The plan of Yahweh is unchanging. The root is holy, and the fullness is coming. Stand firm, brothers, and watch the promise unfold. And so it's all honor, all glory, and all praises to Yahweh, the eternal power of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the righteous judge and the holy one of Yasha'Allah. And blessings be upon the elect through Hamashiach Yahawashi, the anointed king, the Lion of Judah, the deliverer of Zion, the mighty intercessor raised up by the Most High himself. Yahweh alone is the receiver of all praise. And Yahawashi is the door, the mediator, the high priest, the vessel by whom we are reconciled and have access. May the Most High give you eyes to see and ears to hear and a heart to obey. May your steps be ordered by His word and your faith proven by your works and your soul preserved in the day of visitation. Barakatham Bahashem Yahweh, Bahashem Hamashiach Yahawashi, Barakatham, Banyam Yasha'Allah, Kwam Yasha'Allah, Kwam Malak, Kwam Tazadak, Call Haloyam La Yahweh, Thumb Yad. It's your brother Ak Lamak, and I hope you are edified and shalom.